Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to our Wednesday morning Tanya Shiur. We're starting a new series and a new course all the way from the beginning of Tanya, and we'll meet Be'ezras Hashem every Wednesday morning here at 9:30 Los Angeles time. Thank you very much for being here and joining us. Okay, so we're going to study together Be'ezras Hashem from the beginning of Tanya. It's a text-based shiur, which means obviously that we're going to be going through Be'ezras Hashem, the text itself, and as is the minhag of Chassidim, and whenever they would study Tanya, and the minhag of the Chassidim and the Rabbeim, we start literally from the very beginning. So what's called from the Sharblat, from the opening page of the very Tanya itself. It's customary in general, among Chassidim specifically, everything needs a hachana, everything needs preparation and introduction, and things of that nature. So I want to share with you one story that I think is appropriate to share as we start studying Tanya together, just to to get an idea, to highlight kind of the significance and what it is that we're actually, to get some idea of what it is that we're actually learning here and what it is that we're actually engaging in. So I had a great uncle, my grandfather's uncle, may his soul rest in peace, was a very special chassid by the name of Rabbi Shneir Zalman Gorari, Olav Hashalom. He was a big Rosh Yeshiva and a great Talmid Chacham and a tremendous chassid, and had a wonderful, very special personal relationship with the Rebbe. And he was also a businessman. And he would travel a very successful business in Baruch Hashem, and he would travel all around the world for all sorts of different business projects and affairs. And he had a lot going on. He was a busy guy. So after he passed away, I think he passed away around, it was around 15 or 20 years ago, his family printed a book called B'chol Beisi Ne'eman, with some fascinating stories and just different tidbits, interactions that he had with the Rebbe. And here's one of them that really, I'm going to do my best to repeat it accurately, but it really kind of stuck with me because of the significance and what you can learn from it. So the story goes that on one particular occasion he went on a business trip, and as happens, and definitely as happened in those days before communication is what it is today, this would have probably been, I'm guessing, in the 80s at some point, he gets to the airport only to find out that his flight has been canceled. All right, happens. The airline, of course, is being very gracious. They're offering everybody a free night in a hotel and, free if they need to go anywhere, for vouchers for travel, for taxis, vouchers for food, things of that nature. And they're rescheduling everybody for the following morning or the following afternoon, whenever whenever the airline can have them traveling again. So Reb Zalman Gorari comes to the counter and they tell him, listen, I'm sorry, Mr. Gorari, your flight's been canceled, but here you go, you can have a night in a hotel, you can have vouchers for this, that, or the other, as the airlines do. Now, Reb Zalman, of course, is a Yid, he's a from a Yid, he's a chassid, he's not, if he's been given time, he'd like to use it properly. He wants to go home. He doesn't want to spend the night in the hotel. He wants to go home. He wants to wake up early in the morning. He had a Shiur Gemara every morning, I believe, at 6 o'clock. He wants to daven with a minyan. He wants to do those things that the Yid is supposed to do. So he tells the airline, no, thank you. I'm going home. Just let me know when is the next flight, when is the next scheduled whatever, and I'll be back for my next flight. All right, they made arrangements. They told him when he should come back, and he takes his bags and he starts heading right towards the doors of the airport. He's to go home, to get a good night's rest, whatever was left of it, and to start his morning, ala Torah, ala Avoda, davening and learning and serving Hashem. As he gets to the doors of the airport, as he's about to walk out, a thought crosses his mind. About 800 years ago, there was one of the earliest of Rishonim, he's known as Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid wrote for his children, for his descendants, a tzavoah, a last will and testament, in which he left for them all sorts of instructions, primarily based on Kabbalah. Right? Many of them have become very famous. Many of them, over the centuries, have been adapted and adopted in halacha. But at the time, many of them, or most of them, were very novel, Kabbalistic sort of ideas, instructions that he left really just for his own children. It's been printed. It's called Tzavos Rabbi Yehuda Chassid. I don't want to get into it now, but things like not cutting nails or not cutting our nails or hair on Rosh Chodesh comes from Tzavos Rabbi Yehuda Chassid. If you've ever heard of the concept that you're not supposed to polish your shoes on the day that you travel, this comes from Tzavos Rabbi Yehuda Chassid. All sorts of hundreds of different instructions, right? If you've ever heard that a son-in-law and a father-in-law, a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law are not supposed to have the same name. Tzavos Rabbi Yehuda Chassid. Two mechotonim, right? Even the fathers of the chassid, father of the kala, not supposed to have the same name. Tzavos Rabbi Yehuda Chassid. All sorts of, again, fascinating. Actually, it's interesting among the poskim, among the halachic codifiers. For a while, this was actually, some of these instructions were seen as controversial because they had really no source in Gemara or in the earlier writings. Tzavos Rabbi Yehuda Chassid. Okay. So one of the instructions that Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid left for his descendants, but has been since over the centuries, been adopted by many of them by Klal Yisrael, is the following. Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid writes that if a person leaves his home and they're headed off somewhere for wherever it is that they're going, and then for whatever reason they decide they have to go back home before they've reached their point of destination. They got to go back home. They forgot something, they wanted to tell somebody something, whatever the case may be. So Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid says, Beruchni, spiritually speaking, it's a sakona. It's dangerous to go home. Once you've set out on a journey, you must go all the way until wherever it is that you're destined to go. Don't go back home before you reach your destination. I'll pick Kabbalah. What do you do? He writes, what do you do if you need something? What do you do if you get stuck? If you left something, right? You went to mail a letter and you forgot the letter at home. What are you supposed to do? Go mail a letter? You can't mail it. You don't have it. If you absolutely must, he says, go back home, knock on the door, and somebody who's in the home should retrieve for you or get for you or arrange for you whatever it is that you need, and they bring it to you. But you shouldn't go back home if at all it can be avoided. So as Reb Zalman Garari is walking out the airport, he's thinking to himself, wait a second, I came to the airport to go on a business trip. Now my flight's been canceled. So what am I going to do? Go back home? But Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid says, you can't go back home until you've reached your point of destination. My destination is not the airport. He was headed on a business trip. It feels like you shouldn't go home. On the other hand, what is he supposed to do? Take a night in the hotel and just be alone in a hotel overnight? If he goes back home, he can learn, he can have a Shiur Gemara in the morning, he can daven with a minyan, everything like Yid is supposed to do. No, a dilemma. May we know of no greater dilemmas in life, but Reb Zalman was the type that took this kind of stuff very seriously, and so he didn't know what to do. He sat down to think, what am I going to do? Take a night in the hotel or go home? No, what does a chassid do when he's stuck? So he called Rabbi Chadakov. Rabbi Chadakov was the Lubavitcher Rebbe's personal secretary. He called Rabbi Chadakov. This was already at some point in the evening, at nighttime, and he tells Rabbi Chadakov his dilemma. Of course, he's hoping not for Rabbi Chadakov's own wisdom, but he's hoping that Rabbi Chadakov will bring the question to the Rebbe and that he will respond. Anyways, he finds a payphone and he calls the Rabbi Chadakov's office, and Rabbi Chadakov answers and he tells him the story. He says, "I'm stuck in the airport and I don't know what to do. Should I go home or should I go to the hotel?" Rabbi Chadakov took down the phone number of the payphone, and he says, if I have opportunity to speak to the Rebbe, about this within the foreseeable future, I'll get back to you. Fine. And Rabbi Zalman sits down to wait. A little while later, I don't know how long, the payphone rings. So Rabbi Garari jumps up, runs over to the phone. Ya, Shalom Aleichem. Ya, Ret. Rabbi Zalman is do. From the other end of the line, he hears Rabbi Chadakov. Yeah. Rabbi Zalman? Yeah. This is Rabbi Chadakov, the Rebbe's secretary. All right. Rabbi Chadakov says, I had the opportunity to go into the Rebbe's room. And we were talking about different things, and I had the opportunity to mention your dilemma. That you're stuck in the airport and you don't know what to do. Should you go home so that you can spend a restful night at home, wake up in the morning, learn and daven, and then go about your day? Or Tzavos Rabbi Yehuda Chassid. Once you leave your home, you can't go back until you've arrived at your destination. I mentioned this dilemma to the Rebbe. I told the Rebbe that you're sitting in the airport and you're not sure what to do. And the Rebbe gave an eitzah. The Rebbe gave a solution. What did the Rebbe say? He said, call Reb Zalman and tell him that definitely he has with him a Sefer HaTanya. Of course, he has with him a Tanya, because a chassid never goes anywhere without a Tanya. If he has a Tanya, he should open it up and study a chapter of Tanya. Study a chapter. Excuse me. Adaita denafshei. Adaita denafshei means he should study the chapter and should meditate how this particular chapter of Tanya affects him personally, how it talks to him, how it relates to him. And then one chapter. Now, some of the chapters in Tanya are long. Some of the chapters in Tanya, we'll see, Be'ez Hashem, they're relatively short. Everything say which one. Choose anyone. And then he should close the Tanya and he should go home, schlaf a gesundte Heit, sleep a good night, wake up in the morning, daven, learn, do your business, and then go about on your trip. But what's that gonna? Very nice. What's that gonna help? So the Rebbe said, because any chapter of Tanya that you learn and take to heart, take personally what's written there, will change you to such an extent that the person that is returning home is not the same as the person who left. And therefore, there's no concern about Tzavos Rabbi Yehuda Chosid. Tzavos Rabbi Yehuda Chosid says, if you leave to go somewhere, you can't come back until you've arrived at your destination. Okay, but what if the person that left is not the same as the person who's returning? Then there's obviously no problem. Tzavos Rabbi Yehuda. It's somebody else. And there's no problem. They hung up the phone. Reb Zalman studied a chapter of Tanya. He went home, got himself a good night's rest, woke up in the morning, learned, davened, did everything he is supposed to do. And he's about to leave to go back to the airport or wherever it was that he had to go on his journey. As he's about to leave, Rabbi Chadakov comes and finds him in 770, the Rebbe's shul. Rabbi Chadakov comes and finds him. Rabbi Chadakov says, I have another message for you from the Rebbe. Last night, he said, when we were on the phone, and I told you this idea, the Rebbe said, study a chapter of Tanya, and you'll return home a different person than the one you left. Rabbi Chadakov said, I got the sense from you that you kind of, maybe not chuckled, but maybe like smiled, or kind of felt that there was something sort of cute, or humorous, or like a good chap, like the Rebbe had come up with a chap. Study a chapter of Tanya, and the person who returns not the same as the person left. That's a good chap. Rabbi Chadakov said to Reb Zalman Gar, he said, I want you to know, the Rebbe told me to tell you, quote, Was mot geret nechten is nit given al derech hatzachos. But I told you, close quote, but I told you yesterday, I wasn't saying it in jest. I meant it seriously. When we study, that's the story. When we study Tanya, we study it with the understanding that every chapter, every word, every letter contains within itself chokhmah eliki, divine wisdom. Chassidim would refer to the Tanya as the Torah shebechsav, as the Bible, if you will, of Chabad Chassidus, and that the purpose of studying it is not chas v'shalom just to illuminate our minds, just to become smarter and more philosophical. That's why, to be honest with you, it bothers me when people refer to the Tanya as a book of philosophy. Although I see it referred to that way in many places, it's not, God forbid, intended to be simply a philosophical work, chas v'shalom. It's intended to inspire a yid to as we'll see, to really change our perception about everything, about ourselves, about our relationship with Hashem, about our mission in this world, about every part of it, and really to raise us to a higher level of consciousness, to a much higher level of consciousness, and to empower us in this sense in Avodas Hashem. Okay. Also, before we start, I want to give another. That's as far as what it is that the Tanya can accomplish. I feel that story speaks volumes, so that we know the type of power we're holding in our hands here. In terms of the actual toich, in terms of the actual content of the Tanya, I want to give really just one hakdama, one introduction. I should just say this introduction is my own. Every book that's written on Tanya, and there are so many of them, is filled with tens of pages of introduction. but I really want to just give one and just take a few minutes and give you what I think are some of the core principles, some of sort of the core ideas that Tanya is based on. Okay, some of which articulated more explicitly, some of which a little less. But here are some of the critical points that Tanya is based on. Number one, the Tanya is based on the idea that every Yid has a neshama, and the neshama is, quote, a chelek alaka mimal mamash, which means the neshama is literally one with Hashem. This is not something that a Jew has to earn. This is not something that a Jew has to create. This exists within the Yid by virtue of being a Yid, and its relationship, its connection with Hashem is perfect. It is wholesome. It is unbreakable. It is not possible to pervert. It's not possible to deviate from it. It's the essence. In simple words, it's the essence of every single Yid, and it exists in a state of perfect and complete unity with Hashem. All right, that's one. That one's very famous. Number two, also very famous, that every Yid, just like every Yid has a neshama, which is a chelek alakami mal mamash, every Yid also has, or at least is born, with an animal soul, with what we call a nefesh habahamis or a yetzer hara. I don't want to get into the specifics right now, but we also have an engine that pulls us and drives us in the opposite direction. And this yetzer hara, this nefesh habahamis, will battle us every step of the way. And a Yid, shouldn't view this as some sort of dysfunction. Oh, there must be something wrong with me if my nefesh habahamis is challenging me and making my avodas Hashem, my service of Hashem, so difficult for me. I must be doing something wrong. Not true, the Alter Rebbe says. That's not correct. If my nefesh habahamis is so powerful, and if my urges, my temptations, my whatever it is that, and again, and the Tanya will discuss in great detail what exactly the nefesh habahamis is, different types of agendas. A person shouldn't think, if I have all of these temptations and challenges, then there must be something wrong. No, actually, that's part of the plan too. Hashem gives us both. Hashem gives us the nefesh elokis, and Hashem gives us the nefesh habahamis, and there is, by virtue of being a Yid, there's this internal existing battle, right? Every Jew, so to speak, in a spiritual sense, is the ultimate schizophrenic existence. Because just by virtue of who we are, we have these two engines pulling us in two opposite directions. And Zeh Kol Ha'odam, the purpose of life in an avodas Hashem sense is to engage in this battle. And Tanya, of course, provides roadmaps and skills and depths in understanding how it is to deal with this. So again, that's point two. Number one, every Yid in essence is a nefesh elokis, which is a perfect connection with Hashem. Number two, every Yid also has a nefesh habahamis that has the opposite agenda. Okay. Number three, the definition of victory is not our definition of victory is not necessarily correct. If we define victory as destroying the nefesh habahamis, getting rid of it completely, if we define victory as becoming a tzaddik, if we define victory as being liberated from the struggle, then the Alter Rebbe will tell us in no uncertain terms that this may be a terrible perversion of the concept of victory. That may not be victory at all. Hashem may derive more pleasure from our battling the nefesh habahamis than from getting rid of it. So we may have to realign, bechlal, we may have to realign completely what it is in general, even the objective of avodas Hashem. What is when a Jew serves Hashem, you say to the Jew, well, what's the purpose of serving Hashem? We may have to realign that, because if our purpose is to rid ourselves of the struggle, the Alter Rebbe says, number one, that will probably not happen, and number two, if it did, it wouldn't necessarily be a good thing, and number three, that's not from Hashem's perspective the definition of victory. Which again is easier to say, but sometimes very difficult to live with, right? Imagine you bring a person a problem and you tell them, I'm giving you a problem, but I don't want you to solve the problem. What I want you to do with it? I want you to grapple with it your whole life. What's the purpose of that? The Alter Rebbe will talk about this Alter Rebbe will talk about this at great length. Point 4, the Alter Rebbe will talk also at great length in the course of the Tanya over what it is actually that we control and what it is actually that we don't control. Now, I know that planet Earth right now, many human beings on planet Earth are absolutely obsessed with this concept, right? What it is that we control and what it is that we don't control. And it turns out that as we grow older in life, we start to discover that we don't control other people, and we don't control our spouse, and we don't control our children, and we don't control the weather, and we don't control the traffic, and it can be a journey for a person, right? To learn to let go of those things that we don't control. Believe it or not, the Alter Rebbe talks about this. I mean, lahavdil. The Alter Rebbe talks about this from a Kedusha perspective, also a tremendous length in Tanya. What is it bichlal in life that we have control over? It turns out that we really only have direct and immediate control over 3 things. Everything else is out of our control. The 3 things are called machshava, dibur, u'maisa. What it means, we control what we do and what we don't do. We control what we say and what we don't say. And we control what we think and what we don't think. That's it. Our emotions, we don't have direct and immediate control over our emotions. Even when the Torah gives us a mitzvah to have a particular emotion, love Hashem, fear Hashem, etc., it turns out that's not a mitzvah that a person can necessarily, properly, completely fulfill like this. If the Torah says, eat matzah on the night of Pesach, I can make a bracha, I can wash my hands, I can make the bracha and eat the matzah. If Hashem says, put on tefillin, I can wash my hands, I can make the bracha and put on tefillin. If Hashem says, say this, don't say that, think this, don't think that, these are all activities that I can do, that I can control immediately. Emotions, I can't. This is not a deficiency on my end. It's the way Hashem made us. A person cannot press a button and develop a particular emotion or lose a particular emotion. Just not possible. What we can control in the end is our thoughts, speech, and action. And for what we think, speak, and do, for this we are, and what we don't think, speak, and do, for this we are 100% responsible. I want to add something parenthetically here, just for clarity's purpose. There's a difference. Although we talk about machshava, dibur, u'maisa, the 3 things that a person can control, thought, speech, and action, there's a difference between them. Because with dibur, u'maisa, with action and speech, a person can choose to do nothing. Or a person can choose to say nothing. Sometimes very difficult, but nevertheless possible. With regard to thought, a person can never choose to stop thinking. As long as we're alive, our minds are working. And a person also doesn't control which thoughts fall into their head. Right? We do control which words fall out of our mouths. We do control which actions fall out of our hands. But we don't control which thoughts fall into our head. The thoughts that fall into our head, they come from deeper parts of our soul in which we don't have direct control. But we do control, once we become consciously aware that this thought is in our head, we do control if we're going to engage with this thought or not. Excuse me. So not sinning, not committing any sin, b'machshava, the Alter Rebbe will say, doesn't mean that the bad thought, that the forbidden thought doesn't fall into our head. It does fall into our head. That we cannot necessarily control. But the way to deal, but what it means is that as soon as we become consciously aware that this thought is in our head, we can replace it with a different thought and take control over what goes on in our mind. All right, that's close bracket. I just wanted to say that parenthetically. Okay. Next, Tanya is based on the idea that every neshama, every soul that comes into this world has a deep sense, a deep internal sense of a mission that it has, something that it is supposed to accomplish uniquely, this soul's mission and journey, and the soul is dissatisfied until it has embraced and accomplished whatever it was, this mission that it's supposed to accomplish. Another thing that the Alter Rebbe will engage in, primarily in the beginning, but also a fascinating and very novel concept, is the idea that a person's perception of themselves is very important. The way we see ourselves is very important. A person may be tempted to think, who cares what I think about myself? As long as Hashem thinks I'm doing the right thing, as long as the people around me think I'm doing the right thing, as long as I'm a good spouse, I'm a good father, and a good child, No. Alter Rebbe says no. A person needs to have, and he'll bring sources from Gemara and from Mishnah, a person's perception of themselves, the way we see, the way we are, again, I'm going to use a modern expression, you'll forgive me, self-awareness. Lahavdil, the Alter Rebbe will talk about self-awareness from a Kedusha perspective, is incredibly important. The person needs to have be able to have an honest assessment of themselves, where they're holding and their growth in Avodas Hashem. Next, I'm losing count here, but I'm just going through this quickly. Next, another point also critically important. Also, the Alter Rebbe will solidify right at the beginning of Tanya. If you're serving Hashem, if you're involved in Avodas Hashem, and for whatever reason, the Avodas Hashem that you're involved in is not saturating you with simcha. It's not imbuing you with actually not just simcha, the Alter Rebbe says, simcha v'tuv levav, happiness and gladness of heart. Then there's something critically wrong with your Avodas Hashem. Critical. Don't tell me, says the Alter Rebbe, I'm doing all the right things. Don't tell me I'm saying, I'm thinking, I'm doing, if it isn't getting you off your chair, bouncing you up and down with joy, with simcha, then there's something crucially wrong and it must be addressed immediately. Emerge 911 in Avodas Hashem. Unacceptable. It's a sort of a principle in the teachings of Tanya and all of Chassidus. It's absolutely unacceptable that a Jew will both be serving Hashem and not be in a state of simcha. Not possible. These two things cannot coexist. It doesn't mean that a person doesn't have challenges. It doesn't mean that a person doesn't at times feel very profoundly difficult and emotions of pain and bitterness, not depression, chas v'shalom, if it can be avoided, but bitterness and remorse and physical and spiritual pain. But yet, at all times, the primary agenda from an emotional perspective in Avodas Hashem is one of simcha and tuv levav. Okay, two more. Another critical point that will be discussed also at great length in Tanya is that although our emotions are not directly in our control, in other words, although we cannot control sort of at the click of a button, how it is that we feel in our emotional state of being, but we do have indirect control over our emotions. There's something we can do that with time has a very powerful impact on our emotions and can really guide them or propel them in the direction that we so choose. What is it? What is it that we can do that will facilitate our emotions to develop in a particular direction? And the answer that Chassidus and the Alter Rebbe will teach is called hisbonenus, which means in plain and simple English, the thoughts that we carry around in our minds, what it is that we think about, that slowly but surely, like water dripping on a rock, burrows its way into our emotional state of being. So when the Torah gives us a mitzvah that says you should love Hashem, you should fear Hashem, and these emotions of Ava v'yira, as we'll learn soon, are supposed that they carry, they inspire, they motivate a person to learn and daven and serve Hashem in all the right ways, to exercise the right control and make all the right decisions in thought, speech, and action. These emotions of Ava v'yira, they are developed according to Chassidus Chabad, primarily the right way, the best way, the healthiest way, the most permanent, long-lasting way, through hisbonenus. Through hisbonenus means what it is that we fill our heads with. The thoughts we have will filter down into our emotions. and if we engage in the right state of mind, because again, machshava, thought, is something that a person can control. So if we, in plain and simple English, if we fill our heads with positive thoughts, if we become obsessed, so to speak, not in an unhealthy way, chas v'sholom, in a healthy way, if we become obsessed with filling our heads with positive thoughts about the Yid, about the Neshama, about our shlichus in this world, about our avodas Hashem, about all these things we're talking about, then this will slowly but surely filter its way into the avodah shebelev, into the emotional state of being, and develop the right emotions within a person. Alter Rebbe will refer to intellect as the mother, and emotions as the baby or the child. Just like a woman, a mother, will nurture and bring into this world a human being, a baby, a child, and then the baby at some point becomes independent and grows up and develops their own existence. So intellect has the power to nurture within itself emotions. Now, what type of emotions? Depending on the nature of the intellect, of the ideas, that's what type of emotions it develops. Although it takes time, right? Like it takes 9 months to develop a physical human being, it takes time to develop an emotion. But if engaged in consistently, the right emotions can be developed, and they can be developed very powerfully. Okay, and finally, what I want to say for now is an idea that the Alter Rebbe writes in the beginning, in his introduction to Tanya, which we'll get to in Mirz Hashem. Over there, the Alter Rebbe says that Tanya contains answers to questions that people have in all matters of avodas Hashem. In fact, the Alter Rebbe goes so far as to say that any question that any Jew will ever have in any matter of service of Hashem, every answer to that question can be found in Tanya. Quote, Kol hatshuvos al kol hashaylos. All the answers to all the questions. And the Alter Rebbe goes on to say, if you study it and you don't find the answer to your question, this means that it means not that the answer is not there, but it means that you, the one who's studying it, is in a place where they cannot see the answer to their question. And therefore the solution is you must go to someone who can help you study it, who can help you learn it, and show you how the answers to your questions are there. Very similar, by the way, to the idea that the Rebbe said that every chapter of Tanya that you study, if you study the Daita D'Nafshe, you take it to heart, will change you, meaning will make you become a different person. So that's a very similar idea. Okay. With those introductions, I'm going to read together with you, Be'ezus Hashem, again what's called the Sharblat, the opening page of Tanya. If you have in front of you a lessons in Tanya, I'm on page 1. If you have right after the introduction that ends on page XXVI, the next page is page 1. This is called the Sharblat, or the title page. When we start learning Tanya every year in Yutas Kislev, this is where we begin. Hashem should help us that we should study the Tanya correctly. It should motivate us to engage in avodas Hashem correctly according to Chassidus. We should learn with siyata d'shmaya, with the humility, and Hashem should help us that it should be b'atzlacha, and we should be zoicha. As we start studying the Tanya, we daven that we should be zoicha b'ezus Hashem together to conclude studying the Tanya together, and then of course to study it again and again. Sefer Lekutei Amorim. So the Sefer is called Lekutei Amorim. Lekutei Amorim, the Alter Rebbe means, the translation of the word Lekutei Amorim means a collection of sayings, right? Or in fancy English, a compilation of teachings, right? Lekutei Amorim, a collection of sayings. The Alter Rebbe called the Tanya this way, in humility, as if to say that he had contributed, there was nothing novel here of his own, but rather he had just collected, ideas and teachings that he had heard, from his teachers, the Baal Shem Tov, the Mezritch Magid, the Magid of Mezritch, the Mezritch Magid's son, who was known as Rabbi Avram the Malach. Another teacher the Alter Rebbe had, also mentioned later on in Tanya, Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Horodok, the Rabbi Menachem Mendel Vitebsker, from his teachers. And from the Sforim that the Alter Rebbe quotes, very famously the Zoyar, the Tikkunei Zoyar, the Alter Rebbe quotes, the Rambam a lot, the Alter Rebbe quotes a lot, the teachings of the Arizal, as they were recorded by Reb Chaim Vital. There's many references to the teachings of the Shaloh HaKodesh, to the Maharal, etc. Sefer Likutei Amorim, the Sefer is a collection of teachings, of sayings. Chelek Rishon, Tanya has 5 parts. This one is the first part, Hanikra B'Shem, Sefer Shel Beinanim. The Alter Rebbe also called, the first section of Tanya is also called Sefer Shel Beinanim, the book, the Sefer of the Beinanim. Beinanim, there'll be a lot of discussion in the early chapters of Tanya, what exactly is a Beinani, but for now, we'll suffice it to say that the definition of a Beinani is one who is engaged, full-fledged, engaged in the battle between his nefesh elokis, his godly soul, and his animal soul. His animal soul is powerful. When he davens, he has love and fear of Hashem. He works on himself all day to control himself in thought, speech, and action. Everything that he can control. And yet at the same time, he also has a very powerful nefesh abamis, a very powerful animal soul that is also waging war. And the Beinani is the one who is all in this war between the nefesh elokis and the nefesh abamis. It is to this individual that the Alter Rebbe dedicated the Sefer Shel Beinanim. Melukat, the Alter Rebbe says it's collected, it's compiled, mipi Sforim and mipi Seifrim Kedoshei Elyon, from Sforim and authors Kedoshei Elyon, of heavenly saintliness. Again, as I mentioned, the Alter Rebbe, the Sforim is the Zoyar, the Tikkunei Zoyar, the Rambam. The Alter Rebbe quotes the Rambam many places. The Rambam, the writings of the Arizal, again as recorded by Reb Chaim Vital, even as early as Perek Aleph. The Maharal, the Shaloh, the author of Chovos HaLevavos, their teachings are quoted very often. So from the teachers is the Baal Shem Tov, the Mezritcher Magid, and the Alter Rebbe's teachers. Nishmas Kedoshei Elyon Nishmosam Eden, of heavenly saintliness, their neshamas are in Gan Eden. All right. Meyusid, says the Alter Rebbe, the entire Tanya is based on the pasuk Ki korev eilecha hadover ma'oid beficha ubilvavcha la'asoisai. It's a pasuk from Parshas Nitzavim, where Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Jews, he's basically complaining to them, right? What's your guys' problem? Why are you being so difficult? Ki korev eilecha hadover ma'oid. This thing, this matter of Torah mitzvahs, of serving Hashem, it's so close to you. Beficha, in your mouth, ubilvavcha, and in your heart, la'asoisai, to do it. Why is this pasuk the pasuk upon which the Alter Rebbe based the entire Tanya? For now, I just want to say two, for many reasons, but for now I just want to highlight 2. Number 1, beficha ubilvavcha la'asoisai is machshava dibur u'maisa. Beficha in your mouth is dibur. Bilvavcha in your heart is machshava, what you think. La'asoisai is maisa, is action. That means already in this pasuk, what you see, Moshe Rabbeinu is articulating this idea to the Jews. He's telling them, look, what does Hashem want from you? Hashem wants for you to control what you can control, to do what you can do, not what you can't do. On the one hand. On the other hand, he's also telling the Jews, Korei velecha, that it's close to you. And not just close to you, it's Korei velecha dover ma'oid, it's very close to you. Very close for a Yid to be perfect for machshava dibur u'maisa? No. Excuse me, doesn't seem that way. Why would Moshe Rabbeinu, why would the pasuk describe it as being something which is so close? So close implies that it's so accessible. It almost makes it sound like it's easy. And we know, all of us know from personal experience, that this process is not easy. Why is the pasuk calling it Korei velecha dover ma'oid? Alter will explain, Korei velecha dover ma'oid means that a Jew can develop within themselves an emotional state of love and fear of Hashem, which are also part of the 613 mitzvahs. Once a Jew has the emotions, once a Jew has the emotions of loving and fearing Hashem, then of course it's korev elecho adover ma'od beficha v'vav. Then of course it's close to them to say what Hashem wants and to do what Hashem wants and to think what Hashem wants, because they're emotionally inspired this way, right? You know the famous mashal of the guy who's carrying the huge sack up a hill, and it weighs 350 pounds, and it's a hot summer day, and he's sweating profusely, and he's suffering to carry this bag up the hill, right? You know that famous story? And the question is he happy or is he sad? Is he miserable or is he rejoicing? Is he a slave or is he a free man? The answer is it depends what's in the bag. It depends what's in the bag. If the bag is full of dirt, then he's being abused. If the bag is full of gold, then it's the happiest day of his life. So Korev Elecha Dover Moed, Al Rebbe will explain, means the Yid can develop within themselves an Avas Hashem and a Yiras Hashem, an emotional state in which they're infused and enthused to do so, and then it is Korev Elecha Dover Moed Beficha B'vav Cholasais. All right, but again, the emotional, these emotions, this is a different type of avoida. When you tell a person, Machshava Dibra Ma'aseh, thought, speech, and action, control yourself, it literally is that simple. Control yourself. Not easy, but not complicated, right? There are decisions in life that we have to make, which are not easy decisions, but they're also not complicated decisions. We know we're not supposed to eat unhealthy food. We know we're not supposed to engage in certain unhealthy types of activities. It's difficult to do the right thing, but it's not complicated. Whereas when it comes to developing the necessary emotions, over here it is complicated because it isn't directly within our control. So this pasuk becomes the Alter Rebbe says the entire Tanya is based on this. In other words, how to have all of this. The serving Hashem b'machshava dibur u'maisa, and yet to feel that it's korev elecha dov, not just korev elecha dover ma'od. There's a lot written on this. Not just close, it's exceedingly close. In other words, a person can develop within themselves, get to an emotional state where it's not just close, but it's very close. Okay. Levayer Heitev says the Alter Rebbe, to explain the purpose of Tanya is to explain very well Eichu Korev Ma'od. How is it so close? Again, let's put it in the words. How is it so close, so accessible to a person to develop this type of Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem that will carry them through, if you will, like on an eagle's wings, that will carry them through all of their challenges in thought, speech, and action to serve Hashem properly. So Tanya will explain how a person can develop this type of Avas Hashem, Yiras Hashem. And again, it's all going to go back to the idea that what it is that a person thinks about eventually filters down into their emotions. Alter Rebbe adds b'derech arucha uktzara, which simply means that there will be two explanations how to achieve this, how to accomplish this. The first explanation in the first 17 chapters of Tanya, the second explanation from chapter 18 to chapter 25. One is b'derech harucha, one is a much longer road. One is a derech ktsara, one is a shorter road. Be'ezus Hashem Yisborech, the Alter Rebbe says, and of course we will do so with the help of Hashem. And Chassidim would always say, the Alter Rebbe doesn't just mean that he's going to explain it Be'ezus Hashem, but he also means that every Yid needs to remember that in their own avodas Hashem, they always need Hashem's help. Okay. Thank you for being here today. I'm going to try to be disciplined every week and keep the shiur to no more than 45 minutes. So we will stop over here and continue Be'ezus Hashem next week.